Welcome to the SMIS training video series. In this lesson, we will go through the SMIS People, Trains and Other Objects section on simplified sub-event forms, where to find it, and the various objects that are housed within this section of the form, including how you know when to add one of them. The People, Trains and Other Objects section on simplified sub-event forms is located between the sub-event section and the possible causes section, which you can clearly see on the tree view here on the left. The section is in the same place on all simplified SMIS forms. From now on though, I'm going to refer to this section simply as the Objects section. There are also only one of these sections on the form, meaning that all objects, including any of those associated with a prior event, are added to the Objects section on the main part of the form. You can also add as many people, objects, trains, etc. as you need to. So let's go to the People, Train and Objects section now. There are 8 different sections that you can add within the Objects section repeater. So this is the section repeater here, the big grey bar. And if you hover over the arrow here and click on it, this is where you can add the 8 various object options. So let's go through the 8 options now. These are the person section, the train, the dangerous goods, a group, rail vehicle, road vehicle, animal, and finally item or structure. So now let's take a look at each of the 8 sections in more detail. First up, we are going to look at the person section. But before we do this, I'm firstly going to demonstrate the purpose of the red bar guidance in relation to objects. To demonstrate this, I'm going to add the person in prohibited area sub-event. I already have opened the public behaviour sub-event form, and I'm now going to add a person in prohibited area as the main sub-event. So if we go to sub-event, and then here add the public behaviour incident, we can add the person in prohibited area sub-event. So one of the first things that you should see immediately next to question, were they on or near the line, is this big red bar. These red bars will appear across all simplified forms to help you to decide whether or not to add a person, train, or object section to the event. The main purpose of these red bars is to remind you about objects and when you should think about adding them in the object section. Red bars can appear when, say, a specific sub-event is added, such as the person in prohibited area, where you need to add a person section to capture details of the trespasser, or where a question you have answered on a sub-event form is likely to require you to consider adding an object. So in this example, when you add a person in prohibited area sub-event, you're reminded using the red bar guidance that you should add the person section. The guidance reads, to add the person section that was in a prohibited area, add a new person section under people, trains and other objects. It also says you must select in a prohibited area as a role for the person. So now let's go and add the person section. So let's go and add the person section to the object section. So here's a section repeater and we want to add the person. The first question that is common across all object sections is the role question. For the person, the role question reads, What role or roles did the person play in the event? All sections contain a tailored list of multi-select roles. These roles are universal, meaning that no matter which sub-event you select, each person section that you add will have the exact same list of roles. When selecting a role, you must ensure that you review the full list, as you might need to select more than one. Going back to the person in prohibited area scenario, applicable roles may include, as the guidance earlier suggested, we have in a prohibited area, possibly also attempted or committed suicide or intended to self-harm. This is, for instance, where the person might have accessed the running line to try and commit suicide, or you also might want to use had a personal accident. This might apply if, say, the person trespassing was injured as well. Just a warning though, if you don't select all relevant roles, this could have a significant impact when you come to extracting the data, as these roles heavily impact how object sections are evaluated when using Jaspersoft. I'm now going to cover some of the other key fields in the person section. The person type question is important as it will determine which follow-on questions you will be asked. For that reason, the question is accompanied by on-screen guidance to help ensure that you answer the question correctly. Let's say that the person that you want to add details for is a member of the workforce who carried out a suicide intervention with regards to a person trespassing. In this instance, you would select workforce. When selecting workforce, you are then asked a series of workforce-related questions, which include: was the person on duty? Which organisation is the person employed by or volunteering for? The person's employment status and their workforce role. Another unique part of the person section specific to workforce is life-saving rules, where you're asked, did the person breach a life-saving rule? These are a set of 10 rules used by Network Rail to enforce safe working behaviours. If you select yes, you will then also be asked to indicate which of the 10 rules the person breached, and you can select multiple. So let's now go ahead and change the person type to non-workforce. You can see that the work-related questions are no longer applicable and have been replaced by a non-workforce section, with one question that asks, was the person travelling or intending to travel on the rail network, and which, depending on what answer you select, will evaluate whether the person is classified as a passenger or as a member of the public when extracting data from Jaspersoft. What is common though, no matter what person type you select, is the question at the end of the person section where you get asked, did the person suffer an injury or shock? If you select yes, then no matter whether you have selected workforce or non-workforce as a person type, you will be presented with the injury section. So that's this section here. Under the injury type, if you select any of the injury types that indicate that a physical injury was sustained, such as fatality, physical and shock, or physical only, a section repeater will appear that will enable you to add all associated injuries that the person suffered. So let's go ahead and add a body part. And then you can enter the body part that was injured to say what part of the body was injured, and the injury nature to say what type of injury was sustained. After you've added all of the person's injured body parts, this next bit of the injury section again will differ depending on whether you have recorded the person type as workforce or non-workforce. The reason for this is due to differences in riddle reporting between people who are injured whilst at work, so workforce on duty, and non-workforce, where different questions need to be asked to be able to determine whether the injury is statutory reportable to the ORR under the Reporting of Injuries, Diseases and Dangerous Occurrences Regulations 2013, or for short, RIDDOR 2013. So in this example, we've selected non-workforce, and the RIDDOR associated questions are: was the injured person taken directly to hospital? And was it a work-related injury or work-related accident? So for these questions, there is a guidance to the right to help you in deciding whether to select yes or no. So I've quickly changed the person type to workforce, and you'll see that the questions are now replaced by ones that relate to lost time. The group section can be used where groups of people are involved in an event and where, say, individual person details are not typically available to record. So let's go and add a group section. An example of when you might add a group could be, say, if you're recording an event where it was reported that a small group of youth were trespassing on the line. The group allows you to record some general information about a group of people involved in an event. So like all other object section, the group section also has roles, so you can see them listed here. You also can answer what the group size was and the group gender profile and the age group profile. Something to note though, if you do have the individual person details, then we would recommend adding the individual people objects to the event individually, where you can record a lot more detailed person information. So I'm just going to add the animal section. An example of when you might want to add an animal section to an event, let's say in relation to a public behavior event, is, say, when maybe a person accesses a prohibited area to retrieve, for example, their dog, which has slipped its lead and run onto the line. So you can add the animal section. Again, you get the roles that you can pick from, and in this instance, I would say it was being retrieved. Also that it was on or near the line. And you also get to select the animal type. So for this instance, it will be dog, and the number of animals. So we'll say 1. So let's say this time, instead of a person in prohibited area, the event involved the driver of a van swerving around a set of barriers as they commenced the lowering sequence at a level crossing. To enter this type of public behavior event, you would add the incorrect usage of a level crossing as the main event. On the main event, when you select yes to the question of whether the person was in a road vehicle at the time, You will again be presented with the red bar guidance that I mentioned earlier, which will remind you to add the road vehicle object. So let's look at the road vehicle object section. So I'll go and add the road vehicle. Again, you have the roles at the top of the section. So what roles did the road vehicle play in the event? In this event, I would say you could select that it was being driven at the time and that it misused a level crossing. The other questions in the road vehicle section include road vehicle type. So in this instance, I'll say it was a light goods vehicle. You can also identify whether it was what the ownership status was. So in this instance, I didn't know, so I could select unknown. And you could also say, was the road vehicle in motion at the time of the event? And in this instance, it would be yes. To demonstrate adding an item or structure section, let's think about a signal passed at danger event, which we would enter using the SPAD and operating incident form, and adding the signal passed at danger as the main section. Again, the red bar on-screen guidance will be in the main sub-event section to advise you to add the signal that was passed at danger and how to do it. So adding a new item or structure in the object section. So let's go and add the item or structure to capture the signal details. Again, the first question in the item or structure section relates to the role, and the signal's role in this instance is that the signal was passed at danger. The next question asks, what was the item or structure type? And this is either one of 5 options. And each option has some guidance on the right to say what is included. So fixture or fitting, object, plant or machine, structure, tool or equipment. So for the signal, we can see that there's guidance to say it should be selected as a structure. And then you get another question that appears saying, what was the structure type? So we want to say that it was a signal. So we select signal here. And an additional question appears which says, was the signal a fixed asset? Usually this is going to be yes, so we'll select yes here. And now you can see that the signal asset register list appears. So this is similar to the signal asset list in the location section. So all you need to do is say, select the signal from the asset register. So I'll say that it was this signal here, and you select the signal here. Still looking at the signal passed at danger event, as well as adding the signal as the item or structure in the object section, the red bar guidance, which will be in the main sub-event form, will also ask you to add any people involved, including the driver of the train, and also to add the train as an object. I won't add the person as an object here, as we've already looked at it in a previous example. However, there is a specific person role that is relevant to this event called driver of the train, which you can select when you're adding the driver of the train that passed the signal at danger. So now I'm going to add the train object, or train. So when adding the train object, you can see that there's some immediate red bar guidance to remind you to add the rail vehicle to the event as well, if appropriate. So we'll look at that after we've gone through the train section. So again, we have the roles that the train played in the event, and for this we would say that it passed a signal at danger, red, or caution. However, there's also a role called involved in a train track control application or fault, and you'll need to remember to select this if the train had an intervention or activation as a result of the SPAD. The next question is, did the train have a reporting number? If you select yes, you can add the reporting number, or otherwise known as the head code. And the next question is the train type. So there are 4 types. One is unknown, otherwise it's empty coaching stock, freight and other, and passenger. And when you select one of these options, you will get sub-level options where you'll need to enter a more detailed train type, such as was it a diesel multiple unit, was it a diesel loco hauled, electric multiple unit, etc. Then the next question is, what was the train movement at the time of the event, where you can select how the train was moving when the event happened. And then we have the train operator field, which is basically a list of SMIS organizations. So you can select whoever the train operator was at the time. So let's go back to this red bar that appears when you add a train section. In terms of SPADs, it's usually sufficient just to add the train to the event without having to additionally add a rail vehicle section, which it asks here. A time when you may need to add a rail vehicle to an event in addition to the train would be a dangerous goods incident or irregularity. So let's say that the train involved in this SPAD was carrying dangerous goods at the time, where we would want to record which specific rail vehicle was carrying the dangerous goods. In this instance, and other instances where it is important to single out a specific rail vehicle in the formation of a train, we would add the rail vehicle section. So I'll minimize this and go ahead and add the rail vehicle section. Again, you can select the roles, and in this example, I will say that it was carrying dangerous goods. I can also enter the rail vehicle type, the rail vehicle number, and the rail vehicle operator, which is the same list of SMIS organizations. So we've added the rail vehicle that was carrying the dangerous goods, but now we need to go and add the dangerous goods section. The dangerous goods section can be added to all simplified SMIS sub-event forms via the objects section. So I'm going to add the dangerous goods now. The roles section also appears here, and we can say that in this instance it was being transported. The dangerous goods section also has a lot of newly developed on-screen guidance to help you to interpret the more technical questions, which include things like dangerous goods class, and you see the guidance to the right here, the UN number, what it was contained in, packing group, high consequence dangerous good, the dangerous goods risk ranking, and whether the dangerous goods were affected by the event. Now test your knowledge and take the quiz.